So hello everyone, my name is Rudolf and this is joint work with my colleague Dirk Bettmann. We are both at Korea University, and in this work we are looking at basically the well-being of adolescents, and we looked at it across countries. So the title here for the conference is "Why do countries good at PISA have unhappy students?" However, the title is actually updated in our new paper, The Paradox of Wealthy Nations, Unhappy Adolescents. Okay, so let me proceed. So basically, we all know that residents of wealthy nations experience on average higher objective living standards compared to those in less wealthy nations. So higher levels of consumption, leisure, education, health, safety. So these objective living standards are higher, but also subjective well-being, which has been studied more also within the economics discipline in the last 20 years, is higher in countries with higher income levels. So on average, or the average life satisfaction has a positive log linear relationship with GDP per capita. This has been shown in a number of studies in the last few years and decades. Let's move on to the next graph maybe first. So this is the relationship which shows you a clear positive relationship between GDP per capita, log GDP per capita, and adult life satisfaction. The data here is taken from the Gallup-Wall poll. Okay, however, comparisons of life satisfaction across countries have been limited to adult population data. So what we just saw and what we've seen in earlier studies has been based on adult surveys. Little is known, however, about how subjective well-being of children and adolescents correlates with a country's level of income. And here really there's still a lack or a gap in the literature. Adolescent well-being obviously matters in its own right. However, it further matters for later life outcomes, including adult well-being, mental health, employment in later life, and earnings. Now, there could be also a potential well-being efficiency trade-off in education. Yeah, and if you think about wealthy nations, those are mainly knowledge-based economies, modern economies. Those require ever-increasing levels of human capital investment during childhood and adolescence. And so we also know that academic stress is negatively associated with the well-being of students. Hence, children and adolescents in wealthier nations may experience actually increasing disutility from growing learning requirements and school-related stress. And there have been a few interesting studies on that in the recent years. The research objective of this work, of our work, is to investigate, therefore, the relationship between GDP per capita and adolescent life satisfaction, making use of the PISA 2018 data, which is the largest student assessment, international student assessment to date, including 79 countries, out of which for 72 countries data is actually available on subject to well-being, life satisfaction, self-reported, and so on. And also we want to examine potential mechanisms related to learning intensity and school culture. Yes, so the data we used, as I said, OECD's PISA data, 2018, the last round. This study's sample comprises 72 middle and high income countries. Unfortunately, PISA does not collect data in low income countries. And so we have almost 500,000 students of age 15. So those students are all age 15. Additional data that we have here is macro data from standard sources. And we also use adult life satisfaction from the Gallup-Wall poll. Yeah? So the 2018 Gallup-Wall poll. Most of these, or we try to have all of these data from the same year, 2018, if available. So the key variables that we look at, life satisfaction. Yeah, so the question that is asked to students here is overall, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole these days? And they need to respond on a response scale from 0, not at all, to 10, completely satisfied. Yeah, and then of course we want to look at a country's income level, GDP per capita, and PPP terms in 2018. We look also at education-related variables, how they might interact with the income well-being relationship. The education-related variables here are the PISA test scores. Yeah, so the students in PISA have to write all the same test in math, reading, and science. Yeah, across the countries, the same questions. Well, basically, it's randomly selected set of questions out of the same pool of questions. And so we average a student's test score across these 3 subjects, math, reading, and science. Then student competition index, there's a student self-reported questions. Yeah, these are actually 3 different questions combined here in an index of the level of perceived competition in school. And similar to that, equivalent to that, is student cooperation index, so the perception of students of how well students cooperate. Yeah, so let's go into the results here. So basically we start with this figure, which is stunning if you look at it. We find a negative relationship between adolescent life satisfaction and GDP per capita. Yeah, the middle income countries in this range here. Students, 15-year-olds on average in these countries, report higher life satisfaction compared to those at the higher income end. Yeah, and especially a paradox appears here if you compare the relationship of GDP per capita with life satisfaction for adolescents with that of adults that we saw before. Yeah, so here clearly negative, clearly positive relationship. Yeah. Why might that be the case? Well, we had the PISA data, and so it's most obvious that we try to look into education-related variables. The PISA test scores, yeah, if you look at countries' average life satisfaction by PISA test scores, and this is here in 100s units. Yeah, so then you find that the countries that are performing better academically, yeah, in those countries, students report on average a lower life satisfaction. Yeah. By the way, this QCI are the Chinese provinces, eastern provinces that participated in PISA. So the empirical model for our analysis is, well, we do a cross-country regression. So we do a macro analysis here, where we have well-being, yeah, W, and then we have the GDP per capita in log, L and Y. Then we have the education variables, here, a vector of education variables, a vector of control variables. And basically all PISA variables, those on well-being and also the education ones, they were aggregated to country averages using sampling weights. So you can basically, they are supposedly representative for all 15-year-old students in each country. Here's this table of summary statistics. Yeah, we see we have data for 72 countries, subjective well-being, 4 different measures. We want to focus mainly on life satisfaction, but we also have information on affect measures, positive emotions, negative emotions, and then eudaimonia, meaning in life. Yeah. Okay, and then we have the other variables here, our control variables. We control for adult life satisfaction, but then also some typical macro variables, life expectancy, this net enrollment rate, Gini of household income, youth unemployment, population density, air pollution. Yeah. Okay, so very simple bivariate regressions, we start out with those. We find that yeah, life satisfaction has a negative relationship with GDP per capita. That is what we saw on the figure before. Yeah, so adolescents' life satisfaction as GDP per capita goes up, richer countries, yeah, we find a lower level of reported life satisfaction among 15-year-olds. Positive emotions, it's also negative, but not only marginally significant. As you can see, negative emotions tend to increase with GDP per capita, and meaning in life, the reported purpose and meaning in life among those 15-year-olds tends to also fall as a country income level rises. Yeah? And you can see that GDP per capita alone is able to explain 22% of the variation in life satisfaction among these 15-year-olds, yeah? And up to even 30% of the variation in meaning in life. Not so much for the affective or emotional measures, though. Okay, so here we go a bit further. We include more variables in this table, and we focus now only on adolescent life satisfaction. So basically, yeah, if you look here in column 3, we included these 3 education variables. And once we do so, the coefficient for GDP per capita drops significantly, drops by more than half, basically. Yeah? And this shows us that much of this negative effect, actually, that higher incomes have on adolescent life satisfaction runs through education. And what we would call higher education intensity. Our proxy of higher education intensity here is the academic performance, the PISA average test score of a country, which you can see has a strong negative and highly significant effect here on adolescent life satisfaction. In addition to that, 2 more variables, student competition and student cooperation, we find a negative impact of student competition on adolescent life satisfaction and a positive one of student cooperation. In the next model, we add adult life satisfaction in the next 2 models, basically. Yeah? It's we add adult life satisfaction to control for country differences in how we express our well-being or how we evaluate our lives. Yeah? There can be language differences or a different kind of culture of expressing things. And so if we control for adult life satisfaction, we control for this, which actually confirms our main results. It increases slightly the coefficients for GDP per capita here. Yeah, and there is also a positive relationship between adult life satisfaction and adolescent life satisfaction, although not very strong. When we include more macro control variables, then yeah, we can see that the GDP per capita effect goes down completely to become completely insignificant, whereas the other education effects still remain. This does not yet control for the enrollment rates. This is what we did in another table, basically. Okay. So yeah, here robustness and heterogeneity. So what did we do for robustness checks? Well, besides not only looking at life satisfaction, but at these other measures of well-being that I showed you before, we also do the following 2 additional robustness checks. One is controlling for differences in enrollment rates, because one could argue that maybe in the middle-income countries, there are some children which at age 15 are already out of school. So the enrollment is not as high as in high-income countries. And that could introduce a kind of bias, selection bias into the results. Yeah, but when we control for difference in enrollment rates across countries, yeah, we actually still find that the results are confirmed and hold true. Yeah, so that is not what drives our findings. The second check, we use micro-regressions on macro variables. So basically, yeah, in our macro models, we only had up to 72 countries in a macro framework, but we can also run this by looking at individual student life satisfaction as the dependent variable, and then basically run it yeah, as a micro-regression, including some student-related factors, maybe some school-related factors, and some country-related factors, right? That's what we did, and that also confirms our main results. As another application here, we did a heterogeneity analysis estimation by sex, and we found significantly stronger effects for girls, which is also which basically confirms what has been found in earlier literature. So to conclude, we find a negative log linear relationship between per capita GDP and adolescent life satisfaction for middle and high income countries. It needs to be seen whether this also goes for low income countries. Once we have more data, that would be great to analyze this. It's definitely a stark contrast to the otherwise positive relationship found between GDP per capita and adult life satisfaction. And this apparent paradox can largely be attributed to higher emotional cost of schooling, or we could also say higher learning intensity in schools in higher income countries. Okay, so thank you for your attention. And yeah, please send your comments, questions, and suggestions to this email address. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.